Commander Zixtel sat in his chair on the bridge of the exploration ship and stared at the screen in front of him. The numbers made no sense. He checked them again. Then he checked them a third time. The computer was telling him that there were living beings on the planet below. Billions of them. But that was impossible. That planet was supposed to be dead. Not just dead, but deadly. It was one of the most dangerous worlds in this entire section of the galaxy. He had been exploring space for over 40 years. He had seen many strange things in his long career. He had visited frozen worlds, where the ice went down for thousands of miles. He had flown past gas giants with storms bigger than most planets. He had documented life forms that lived in the burning hearts of volcanoes. But he had never seen anything like this. The planet on his screen was called Earth by its local inhabitants. His people had known about it for centuries. They had classified it long ago as a Category Omega world. This was the highest danger rating possible. Category Omega meant that no intelligent species could possibly survive there. The conditions were simply too harsh. The environment was too hostile. Any explorer who landed there would die within hours, maybe minutes. Zixtel pulled up the planetary data and read through it again. The atmosphere was filled with oxygen, a highly reactive gas that could burn through metal over time. The planet experienced extreme temperature changes, swinging from burning hot to freezing cold, depending on location and season. Some areas reached temperatures that could boil water. Other areas dropped so low that the very air would freeze solid. The surface was covered mostly with water. Not just any water, but salt water, filled with dissolved minerals and chemicals. This water was home to millions of predatory species. Some had teeth like knives. Others had poison in their bodies. Still others were so large they could swallow a small ship whole. The water also moved constantly, creating massive waves that could crush anything in their path. The land was not much safer. The ground itself was unstable. It would shake and crack open without warning, destroying everything above it. Mountains would sometimes explode, throwing fire and melted rock into the sky. The weather systems were equally violent. Massive spinning storms would tear across the surface, destroying everything they touched. Walls of water would fall from the sky. Electricity would strike down from the clouds with enough power to kill instantly. And then there were the diseases. The planet was covered with tiny invisible creatures that existed only to invade larger life forms and destroy them from within. These microscopic killers were everywhere. In the air, in the water, in the food, on every surface. They were constantly changing, constantly adapting, constantly finding new ways to attack. By every measure, Earth should have been empty. It should have been a dead rock floating in space, too dangerous for any complex life to evolve. And yet, Zixtel was looking at readings that showed billions of life forms. Not just simple creatures, but intelligent beings. Beings who had built cities, beings who had created technology, beings who had somehow found a way to survive on a world that should have killed them all. He called his senior officers to the bridge. Lieutenant Vren arrived first, followed by the ship's doctor and the science team leader. They all gathered around the main screen and looked at the data. Nobody spoke for a long time. This has to be an error, Vren said finally. The sensors must be broken. I have checked them 3 times, Zixtel replied. They are working perfectly, and the database is wrong. Maybe this planet is not as dangerous as we thought. The science team leader shook her head. I have reviewed all the environmental data. The database is accurate. This world is exactly as deadly as our records indicate, perhaps even more so. The doctor leaned forward and studied the biological readings. His face showed complete confusion. These life forms are not wearing any protective equipment. They are directly exposed to the atmosphere. They are walking around on the surface with no shields, no barriers, no environmental suits. How is this possible? Zixtel made a decision. We need to get closer. We need to see this for ourselves. The ship moved into a lower orbit. They activated their stealth systems so they would not be detected. Then they launched observation drones to the surface. The drones were small and silent. They could fly anywhere and record everything without being noticed. The first images came back within the hour. They showed a coastal area on a large landmass. The local inhabitants called this place Florida. What the exploration team saw on their screens left them speechless. Thousands of humans were gathered on a strip of land next to the ocean. They were lying on the ground, completely exposed to the radiation from their sun. Their star was a yellow dwarf, and it bombarded the planet with dangerous ultraviolet rays. These rays could damage cells and cause deadly diseases. Yet the humans were not hiding from this radiation. They were seeking it out. They were lying directly under it, letting it hit their unprotected skin. Some of them had covered their bodies with oils and lotions. At first, the explorers thought this might be some kind of protection. But their scans revealed the truth. These substances were designed to make the radiation absorb faster. The humans wanted to change the color of their skin. They were deliberately damaging themselves for appearance. The children were even more confusing. They ran directly into the salt water, screaming and laughing. Their parents watched and smiled. Did they not know what lived in that water? Did they not understand the dangers? The explorers could detect sharks swimming less than 100 meters from where the children played. Jellyfish with venomous tentacles drifted just below the surface. Stingrays hid in the sand where tiny feet were stepping. One human male walked to a small building and purchased a food item. The explorers analyzed it and found it contained processed meat of questionable origin, chemicals that had no nutritional value, and bacteria that could cause serious illness. The human ate it in 4 bites. Then he ran into the water with the sharks. "They are not surviving this planet," Vren whispered. Her voice was filled with shock. "They are playing on it. They are treating it like a game." Zixtel watched the screen in silence. He had explored hundreds of worlds. He had studied thousands of species. He had seen life adapt to incredible conditions. But he had never seen anything like humans. They did not just tolerate their deadly planet. They did not just endure its dangers. They actually seemed to enjoy them. They sought out the most dangerous places and called it fun. They exposed themselves to deadly conditions and called it relaxation. The commander turned to his crew. "We need to study these beings more carefully. I want drones deployed to every continent. I want to understand how they live. I want to understand how they think. Because right now, nothing about them makes any sense." The crew nodded and went to work. None of them knew it yet, but they were about to witness things that would challenge everything they believed about survival, about intelligence, and about what it truly meant to be alive. The humans of Earth were about to show them something no other species in the galaxy had ever shown them before. The observation drones spread across the planet over the next several days. They flew silently through the skies, invisible to human eyes and undetected by human technology. Commander Zixtal and his crew watched the footage from their ship in orbit, and with each passing hour, their confusion grew deeper. The coastal regions seemed to be the most popular destinations for human recreation. The explorers found this deeply troubling. These were among the most dangerous areas on the entire planet. The ocean was unpredictable and violent. The sun exposure was at its highest. The concentration of dangerous creatures was extreme. And yet millions of humans traveled to these places every year. They called it vacation. They called it relaxation. They paid large amounts of their currency for the privilege of putting themselves in danger. Vren focused her attention on a beach in a country called Australia. This nation was particularly fascinating to the explorers because it seemed to contain more deadly creatures than anywhere else on Earth. The waters around Australia were home to box jellyfish, whose venom could stop a human heart in minutes. Saltwater crocodiles patrolled the rivers and coastlines, some growing longer than the explorers' shuttlecraft. Sharks of every variety hunted in the waves. And yet the beaches were packed with humans. She watched a family set up their belongings on the sand. There were 2 adults and 3 children. The youngest could not have been more than 4 years old. The parents spread out large pieces of fabric on the ground and then proceeded to remove most of their clothing. The children immediately ran toward the water. "Parents are not following them," Vren reported to the commander. "They are lying down. They are closing their eyes." "Are the children trained in ocean survival?" Zixtel asked. "Negative. The youngest one does not even know how to swim properly. I am watching him struggle in the shallow water right now." The commander shook his head slowly. And the parents are not concerned? They appear to be sleeping. For the next hour, Viren documented the family's activities. The children went in and out of the water repeatedly. They built structures out of sand that the waves immediately destroyed. They found small creatures in tide pools and picked them up with their bare hands, not knowing if they were venomous or safe. The parents occasionally opened their eyes to check on them, but mostly they lay still, cooking themselves under the radiation. At one point, a warning flag was raised on the beach. Vren scanned the water and detected a large shark swimming parallel to the shore. Lifeguards used whistles to call swimmers back to the sand. The humans left the water and stood watching the dark shape move through the waves. When the shark finally swam away, they went right back in. The whole interruption had lasted less than 10 minutes. They knew a predator was there, Vren said, her voice filled with disbelief. They saw it. They watched it swim past them, and then they returned to the exact same water. Meanwhile, another drone was observing a different kind of beach activity. This was on an island called Hawaii, in the middle of the largest ocean on the planet. Humans here had developed a practice called surfing. They would carry large flat boards into the water, paddle out past the breaking waves, and then stand on these boards as the waves carried them back toward shore. The waves in this area were enormous. Some of them reached heights of 10 meters or more. They moved with incredible force, enough to crush bones and tear flesh. The rocks near the shore were sharp and unforgiving. Currents beneath the surface could pull a swimmer down and hold them there until they drowned. The humans rode these waves for fun. The explorers watched a young woman paddle out into the churning water. She waited, floating on her board, watching the horizon. When she saw a suitable wave approaching, she turned and began paddling hard. The wave lifted her up, and in one smooth motion, she stood on her board and began to ride. She carved across the face of the wave as it curled over her, creating a tunnel of water. For a few seconds, she was completely inside the wave, surrounded by tons of crushing liquid. Then she shot out the other side, raised her arms in celebration, and paddled back out to do it again. She almost died, the science team leader observed. If that wave had collapsed 1 second earlier, she would have been driven into the reef below. She knows this, Zixtel replied. Look at her face. She is smiling. She is happy. She nearly died and she is happy about it. The beaches revealed other strange human behaviors as well. The explorers documented humans consuming large quantities of fermented beverages that impaired their judgment and coordination. These same humans would then enter the dangerous water. They would operate vehicles on the sand while intoxicated. They would fall asleep in the sun and burn their skin so badly that it would peel off in sheets. They ate food that had been sitting in the hot sun for hours, breeding bacteria that could cause serious illness. They applied chemicals to their skin that were toxic if swallowed. And then they touched their faces and put their fingers in their mouths. They walked barefoot on sand that reached temperatures high enough to cause burns. One drone recorded a group of young humans playing a game they called chicken. 2 of them would swim out into deep water. Then they would wait for a large wave to come. When it arrived, they would try to dive under it at the last possible moment. The one who waited longest before diving was the winner. The explorers calculated that several of these attempts came within fractions of a second of ending in death. Believe I am beginning to understand these creatures, the ship's doctor announced one evening as the crew reviewed the day's footage. They are not unaware of the dangers around them. They know perfectly well that their environment is hostile. They understand that they could be killed at any moment. Then why do they behave this way? Vrin asked. Because the danger is the point, the doctor replied. They are drawn to it. They seek it out. For them, the feeling of almost dying seems to be connected to the feeling of being fully alive. The closer they come to death, the more intensely they experience life. Commander Zixtel considered this theory. It made a certain kind of sense, even if it was completely alien to his own psychology. His species had evolved to avoid danger at all costs. They had survived by being careful, by being cautious, by eliminating risk wherever possible. The idea of deliberately seeking out danger was almost impossible for him to understand. But humans were different. They had evolved on a world where danger could not be avoided. Death was always present, always close, always waiting. Perhaps they had learned to embrace it because they had no other choice. Perhaps their joy in the face of danger was the only way they could survive without going mad. Or perhaps, Zixthel thought as he watched a human dive off a cliff into shallow water far below, they were simply the strangest creatures the galaxy had ever produced. The exploration would continue. The beaches were just the beginning. The commander had received reports of even more unusual human behavior in the mountainous regions of the planet. Humans were apparently climbing to the tops of the highest peaks, places where there was not enough oxygen to breathe and where temperatures could freeze exposed. Flesh in minutes. They were doing this for fun. Zixtel prepared himself for what he was about to see. He had a feeling that the mountains would challenge his understanding even more than the beaches had. The drones arrived in the mountain regions and began transmitting images back to the ship. Commander Zixtel sat in his observation chair and watched in stunned silence. If the beaches had confused him, the mountains completely broke his understanding of how intelligent beings should behave. The first location was a mountain range called the Alps, located in the central part of a continent called Europe. These mountains rose high into the atmosphere, reaching elevations where oxygen levels dropped to dangerous lows. The temperatures at the peaks fell far below freezing. The terrain was covered in frozen water that could shift and collapse without warning, burying everything beneath it in seconds. Thousands of humans were there, not fleeing, not trying to survive. They had paid money to be there. They had traveled great distances and spent significant resources to reach these deadly peaks. And they were smiling. The explorers watched a group of humans attach long, thin boards to their feet. These boards were designed to slide across the frozen surface at high speeds. The humans then positioned themselves at the top of a steep slope and pushed off. Within seconds, they were racing downward at speeds that would kill them instantly if they hit any obstacle. They did not travel in straight lines. That would have been too safe. Instead, they carved back and forth across the slope, sometimes turning so sharply that they nearly fell. They jumped over bumps in the terrain, flying through the air with nothing beneath them but hard ice and rock. Some of them performed spins and flips while airborne, as if simply skiing down a dangerous mountain was not exciting enough. They have no protective equipment, Vren observed. If they fall at those speeds, their bodies will break. They fall frequently, the science team leader added. I have counted 17 falls in the past hour from this one group alone. Several of them are now limping. One appears to have injured his shoulder. They are continuing anyway. The medical facilities near these ski areas were constantly busy. The explorers monitored radio communications and learned that broken bones were common. Knee injuries happened daily. Head injuries occurred despite the thin helmets some humans wore. Every year, people died on these mountains. And every year, even more people came to replace them. But the skiing humans were not the most extreme. The drones discovered another group of humans engaged in an activity far more dangerous. They were climbing the mountains on foot, not walking up gentle trails. Climbing, straight up sheer. Rock faces hundreds of meters tall. They used ropes and metal tools that they drove into cracks in the rock. They pulled themselves up, inch by inch, clinging to surfaces that offered almost no grip. Below them was nothing but empty air and hard ground. Commander. Zixel watched one climber reach a section of rock that jutted outward over the abyss. To continue upward, the climber had to hang backwards over the void, supported only by his grip on tiny handholds. His fingers were bleeding from the rough stone. His muscles were shaking with exhaustion. One wrong move would send him falling to his death. He made it past the overhang and let out a shout of triumph. Then he continued climbing. Why does he not use flying equipment? The doctor asked. Humans have developed aircraft. They could reach the top without any of this risk. That would defeat the purpose, Zixtel replied. He was beginning to understand, even if he could not fully accept it. The risk is the purpose. The struggle is the point. If it were easy, they would not do it. The most disturbing discovery came from the highest peaks on the planet. These were mountains so tall that the air at the top contained barely enough oxygen to sustain consciousness. The temperatures dropped to levels that could freeze human flesh in minutes. The winds blew so hard that they could knock a person off their feet and send them tumbling into endless. One mountain in particular drew the explorers' attention. The locals called it Everest. It was the tallest point on the entire planet. Reaching its summit required days of climbing through what humans called the death zone, an area so hostile that the body began to die the moment it entered, and there were humans lining up to climb it. The explorers learned that hundreds of people attempted to climb Everest every year. Many of them died. Their bodies remained on the mountain, frozen in place, because conditions were too dangerous to retrieve them. Climbers on their way to the summit would walk past these frozen corpses, these permanent reminders of what could happen, and they would keep climbing. One drone recorded a conversation between two climbers at a base camp. They were discussing a friend who had died on the mountain the previous year. His body was still up there, visible from the main climbing route. They spoke about him with sadness, with respect, with love. Then they picked up their equipment and began climbing toward the same peak that had killed him. They see death, friend whispered. They walk past death. They lose friends to death. And still they continue. It is not stupidity, the doctor said after a long pause. I have analyzed their brain patterns. These are intelligent beings making conscious choices. They understand the risks completely. They accept them. They consider the reward worth the cost. What reward? Vren demanded. What could possibly be worth dying for? There is nothing at the top of that mountain. No resources. No shelter. Nothing but rock and ice and thin air. Commander Zixthal thought about this question for a long time before answering. The reward is the climb itself, he finally said. The reward is proving that they could do it. The reward is pushing their bodies and minds to the absolute limit and surviving. They are not trying to reach the top. They are trying to discover what they are capable of. The mountain is just the tool they use. This explanation made sense to the crew, but it did not make the behavior any less alien. Their species had never felt the need to test themselves against nature. They had always worked to control nature, to tame it, to make it safe. The idea of deliberately seeking out the most dangerous environments just to see if they could survive was completely foreign to their way of thinking. But the mountains revealed something else about humans as well. When climbers got into trouble, other climbers would risk their own lives to save them. Rescue teams would venture into deadly conditions to bring back injured strangers. People who had never met would share food, shelter, and equipment with those in need. The mountains brought out both the most reckless and the most selfless aspects of human nature. These beings would risk everything for a personal challenge, but they would also risk everything to help someone else. They were simultaneously the most self-destructive and the most compassionate creatures the explorers had ever studied. As the drones continued their surveillance, the crew received reports of other dangerous human recreation activities around the planet. Humans were jumping out of aircraft with only fabric parachutes to slow their fall. They were diving deep underwater with limited air supplies. They were racing vehicles at deadly speeds. They were exploring underground caves where a single wrong turn could trap them forever. Everywhere the explorers looked, they found humans seeking danger. It seemed to be a fundamental part of their nature, woven into their very being. The ship's psychologist began working on a comprehensive report about human risk-taking behavior. She believed it was connected to their evolution on such a hostile world. Danger had been their constant companion for millions of years. Perhaps they had developed a psychological need for it. Perhaps they felt most alive when death was closest. Whatever the explanation, one thing was becoming clear. Humans were not like any other species in the known galaxy. They had not conquered their deadly planet by becoming cautious and careful. They had conquered it by becoming completely unafraid of death. This made them either the bravest beings in the universe or the most insane. Commander Zixthal was still not sure which. The exploration team thought they had seen the strangest aspects of human behavior. They had watched humans deliberately expose themselves to deadly radiation. They had observed them swimming with sharks and climbing mountains that had killed their friends. They believed nothing could surprise them anymore. They were wrong. the discovery came. When a drone was following a human female through her daily routine, she lived in a dwelling in a suburban area, a region of houses and small gardens on the edge of a larger city. Her behavior throughout the day was fairly ordinary. She prepared food. She communicated with others through electronic devices. She performed tasks related to her employment. Then she opened her front door, and a wolf attacked her. The crew watched in horror as the large animal leaped at the woman, knocking her backwards. Its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Its powerful body pinned her to the ground, and then it began licking her face. The woman was laughing. She wrapped her arms around the creature and hugged it. She spoke to it in a high-pitched voice, using words like good boy and precious baby and who is the best wolf in the whole world. That is not a wolf, the science team leader announced after running genetic analysis. Not exactly. It is a domesticated descendant of wolves. Humans call them dogs. They have been bred over thousands of years to be companions. Companions? Vryn repeated. That creature weighs more than she does. It could tear her throat out in seconds. Yes, and according to my research, it sometimes happens. Dogs kill humans every year. And yet, there are hundreds of millions of these animals living inside human dwellings across the planet. The drones spread out to investigate this phenomenon further. What they found challenged everything the explorers thought they understood about. Survival instincts. Humans kept predators in their homes. Not just dogs, but many different species of dangerous animals. They called them pets. They treated them as family members. They spent enormous resources on their care and comfort. And in return, these animals provided nothing except companionship. Cats were particularly fascinating to the explorers. These were small predators with sharp claws and teeth. They were descendants of wild hunters that had killed prey for millions of years. Studies showed that domestic cats still possessed all of their predatory instincts. When given the opportunity, they would hunt and kill smaller animals. Some scientists on Earth had even suggested that if cats were larger, they would likely hunt humans as well. Humans knew all of this. They found it amusing. They made jokes about it on their communication networks. They would share images of their cats looking sinister and add text suggesting the animal was planning murder. And then they would pick up these tiny predators and cuddle them and let them sleep on their faces. One drone recorded a family with young children and 3 large dogs. The dogs were a breed called German Shepherd, originally developed for herding and guarding. They had powerful jaws capable of crushing bone. They were intensely protective of their territory. Any threat to the family would be met with aggressive defense. The children used these dogs as pillows. They climbed on their backs. They pulled their tails and ears. They shared their food with them, putting their small hands directly into the mouths of animals that could bite through steel cable. The dogs tolerated all of this with patience, wagging their tails and licking the children clean. They have taken pack hunters and integrated them into their family units, the doctor observed. The dogs see the humans as their pack. They protect them as they would protect their own offspring. It is a remarkable evolutionary partnership. It is insane, Vryn countered. One day, one of those animals will snap. Its instincts will override its training, and those children will be killed. And the humans seem to accept this possibility. They consider the benefits worth the risk. But dogs and cats were not the most surprising pets humans kept. The drones discovered people keeping creatures that could kill them much more quickly. In one dwelling, human male had constructed elaborate glass containers filled with snakes. Not small, harmless snakes. These were constrictors large enough to wrap around a human body and squeeze until the heart stopped. The man would open these containers regularly and handle the snakes with his bare hands. He called them his babies. Another human had an aquarium filled with small, colorful fish. The explorers analyzed the species and discovered they were some of the most venomous creatures on the planet. A single sting from one of these fish could cause excruciating pain and even death. The human fed them carefully every day, watching them swim with an expression of peaceful contentment. People kept spiders that could kill with a single bite. They kept scorpions with tails full of venom. They kept crocodiles and alligators in enclosures behind their homes, feeding them chunks of meat and sometimes posing for Photographs beside them, the ship's psychologist worked overtime trying to understand this behavior. She developed several theories. Perhaps humans kept dangerous animals to demonstrate their dominance over nature. Perhaps the presence of predators made them feel protected. Perhaps they simply enjoyed the thrill of living alongside creatures that could kill them. But the most compelling theory was simpler. Humans were social beings who formed emotional bonds easily. They could bond with almost anything, including things that wanted to eat them. Their capacity for love was so powerful that it overrode their survival instincts. The explorers found evidence for this theory everywhere they looked. Humans would risk their lives to save their pets from fires and floods. They would spend their entire savings on medical care for sick animals. When their pets died, they mourned them as deeply as they mourned their own family members. One recording showed an elderly human, a woman who lived alone with 17 cats. Her dwelling was filled with them. They climbed on every surface. They shed fur on all her belongings. They demanded constant attention and care. Some of them had special medical needs that required expensive treatments. This woman had very little money. She lived on a fixed income that barely covered her basic needs, but she spent most of it on her cats. She fed them before she fed herself. She kept them warm when she was cold. She would have done anything for them. She loves them, the doctor said softly. Despite everything, despite the cost and the inconvenience and the danger, she loves them unconditionally. Commander Zixtel watched the footage of the old woman surrounded by her cats. One of them was sitting on her chest, purring loudly, its claws occasionally kneading her skin hard enough to draw small spots of blood. She stroked its fur and smiled as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. Perhaps this is how they survive, the commander said finally. Perhaps this is the secret to living on a deadly world. They form bonds. They connect with other living things. They love so strongly that they forget to be afraid. That sounds like a weakness, Fren observed. Or a strength, the doctor replied. A species that can love this deeply would fight to the death to protect what they love. They would never give up. They would never surrender. They would face any danger, endure any hardship, survive any disaster, because they have something worth surviving for. The crew considered this idea in silence. Their own species was not known for strong emotional bonds. They valued logic and caution above all else. They had survived by being careful, not by being passionate. But humans had taken a different path. They had survived by caring so much about each other, and about the creatures they shared their world with, that they would do anything to keep them safe. Their love made them reckless. It also made them unstoppable. The observation drones continued their work, recording more examples of humans and their dangerous pets. Dogs that weighed more than their owners. Cats that knocked glasses off tables just to watch them break. Snakes that escaped their enclosures and hid in the furniture. Through it all, the humans kept loving them. Whatever else could be said about this strange species. Their capacity for affection was remarkable. They had taken a world full of things that could kill them and filled their homes with more things that could kill them, simply because it made them feel less alone. It was the most human thing the explorers had observed yet. 6 months had passed since Commander Zixtel first detected life on the planet called Earth. In that time, his crew had observed more strange and wonderful things than they had seen in decades of exploring other worlds. They had filled thousands of data files with recordings, analysis, and attempts to understand the impossible species that lived below them. Now it was time to leave. Their mission was complete. They had gathered enough information to file their report with Galactic Command. The question was what that report would say. The commander called his senior officers to the conference room for one final meeting. They sat around the curved table, their faces showing the exhaustion of months of intensive study. The main screen displayed a slowly rotating image of Earth, its blue oceans and green continents glowing softly in the reflected light of its sun. "We need to reach a consensus," Zixtel began. "Galactic Command will want to know if this species poses a threat. They will want recommendations for future contact. They will want to know if these humans should be observed, avoided, approached, or contained." Lieutenant Vren spoke first. "They are clearly dangerous. not because they have advanced weapons or hostile intentions, but because they are completely unpredictable. Their behavior follows no logical pattern. They seek out danger instead of avoiding it. They keep predators as companions. They climb mountains that kill them and swim in oceans full of creatures that eat them. Any species this disconnected from normal survival instincts cannot be trusted. The doctor shook his head. I disagree. Their behavior seems illogical to us because we evolved differently. But everything they do serves a purpose. Their risk-taking keeps them sharp and adaptable. Their bonds with other creatures give them allies and emotional support. Their willingness to face death makes them resilient in ways we cannot imagine. They are not disconnected from survival. They have simply found a different path to it. The science team leader pulled up some data on her screen. Let me share some additional findings. In the past 6 months, we have observed humans respond to natural disasters, accidents, and emergencies of all kinds. In every single case, they displayed remarkable cooperation and selflessness. When earthquakes struck, strangers dug through rubble to save other strangers. When floods came, people with boats rescued families they had never met. When fires spread, neighbors helped neighbors evacuate, often risking their own lives in the process. She paused to let this sink in. This is a species that will die for each other. Not just for family or friends, but for complete strangers. They have organized entire systems around this principle. They have groups called firefighters who run into burning buildings to save people they do not know. They have rescue teams who search through disaster zones for survivors. They have people who donate their own blood and organs to keep others alive. They also have wars, Vryn pointed out. They kill each other in organized conflicts. They have weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. True, the science leader acknowledged. They are capable of terrible violence. But they are also capable of extraordinary kindness. They contain both extremes within the same species. Perhaps within the same individual. Commander Zixtel had been listening silently. Now he stood and walked to the main screen, gazing at the image of Earth. I have been thinking about what we have observed, about the beaches and the mountains and the pets and all the other strange things humans do, and I believe I have come to understand something important. He turned to face his crew. We have always assumed that intelligence leads to caution, that advanced beings would naturally develop risk-averse behaviors, that the goal of any thinking species would be to minimize danger and maximize safety. This is how we evolved. This is what makes sense to us. He gestured at the planet behind him. But humans prove that there is another way. They evolved on a world where danger could never be eliminated. Death was always present, always close, always waiting. They could not hide from it. They could not control it. So instead, they learned to embrace it. They made friends with it. They turned it into a source of joy rather than fear. The room was silent as the commander continued. This has made them something we have never encountered before. A species that is not afraid to die. A species that will take risks no other being would consider. A species that loves so deeply and lives so intensely that they pack more life into their brief decades than most beings experience in centuries. He returned to his seat. Galactic Command will want to know if humans are a threat. The answer is complicated. They are not aggressive toward other species. They have not developed interstellar travel. They pose no immediate military danger. But they are, in a certain sense, the most dangerous beings we have ever studied. Why? The doctor asked. Because they are unpredictable. Because they do not follow the rules that govern other intelligent life. Because when other species would retreat, humans advance. When others would give up, humans persist. When others would accept their limits, humans push past them. The commander paused, choosing his next words carefully. If this species ever turns its attention to the stars, if they ever develop the technology to leave their deadly world and explore the galaxy, they will be unlike anything the universe has ever seen. They will not be stopped by harsh conditions or dangerous environments. They will not be deterred by setbacks or losses. They will keep coming, keep trying, keep pushing forward because that is simply what they are. The science leader nodded slowly. So what do we recommend? Commander Zixtel was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak, and his words would form the foundation of the most unusual report Galactic Command had ever received. We recommend observation from a safe distance. Do not attempt contact at this time. Do not attempt intervention. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt conquest or containment. These beings have survived on one of the most hostile worlds in the galaxy by being more stubborn, more adaptable, and more fearless than any environment could break. He looked around the table at his crew, making sure they understood the weight of what he was saying. We recommend studying them carefully, learning what we can from their example, because whatever challenges the galaxy may face in the future, whatever dangers may threaten intelligent life, humans have proven something remarkable. They have proven that survival is not about avoiding risk. It is about facing risk with courage. It is about loving deeply enough to have something worth fighting for. It is about embracing life so completely that death loses its power. The commander stood once more, preparing to leave the conference room and begin the long journey home. He took one final look at the blue planet on the screen. These beings vacation on a world that should have killed them all. They play games on beaches where sharks swim. They climb mountains that are littered with the frozen bodies of those who tried before them. They keep predators as companions and poison as decoration. They are either the bravest species in the universe or the most completely insane. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at his crew. Perhaps they are both. Perhaps that is what makes them human. Perhaps that is why, despite everything, despite all the danger and death and chaos of their world, they are still here, still surviving, still thriving, still laughing in the face of a universe that should have destroyed them long ago. The door opened, and Commander Zixthiel stepped through it. "Never underestimate them," he said as the door closed behind him. "Never underestimate humans." The ship powered up its engines and began the long journey back to Galactic Command. Behind them, Earth continued its rotation, its billions of inhabitants completely unaware that they had been studied, unaware that they had been deemed remarkable, unaware that somewhere in the vast reaches of space, their story would be told as a tale of wonder and warning. The humans went about their lives. They swam in dangerous oceans and climbed deadly mountains and hugged their dogs and cats. They took risks and fell in love and lived each day as if it might be their last. Because on their world, it very well might be, and in their own strange, beautiful, terrifying way, they were the most alive beings in the entire galaxy.